Welcome to the Strategic Insights podcast. It's our inaugural podcast today. Looking forward to a good conversation with our guest, Stephen Rosenthal, CEO of PICS. Today will be a fun conversation regarding what's going on in the industry and the ecosystem of QAD, as well as what we're seeing and the changes that have happened post-COVID. Stephen, welcome today.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Excited to be here, and it's an honor to be a part of the inaugural episode. I'm pretty excited.
You know, as we look to venture down this road from, you know, as you've seen, because obviously your background in podcasting, the requests coming in from the user community, your name of course came right up because you're leading the charge. So we were excited to see if you'd be willing to do this, and I thank you for taking part. For those that don't know you, why don't you give a little background on yourself, Stephen, for those listening?
Sure. Yeah. So, like Andrew mentioned, I'm the CEO of PICS DocLib. Came up in the QAD space. My father actually started a QAD consultancy back in the early 90s when a lot of those first popped up around the same time as Strategic Information Group. And they quickly, well, not really quickly, but in the early 2000s morphed over more towards a software business as opposed to, a services-based business. And then I came on board as in the sales and marketing realm with my outsourced sales business and my marketing business, helping PICS DocLib kind of hit a new inflection point was the goal or the hope. So that started to happen, and then it quickly became apparent that they wanted to get out of the software business in general and start their retirement life. So that happened. They were interested in doing that in 2021. I bought the business from my father and his partner at the time in November of 2021. And then it's been a really great experience since then, trying to grow this business in the QAD space and beyond. And, Strategic Information Group's been a big part of that. So it's an honor to help support, what you guys have going on here with the podcast, and happy to discuss what we're seeing in the space. There's a lot of changes, so we've got a lot to cover, and I'm glad we're doing a podcast about it.
No, absolutely. I know that, my 10 years in this space, specifically with just QAD, I think you and I have met almost on day one. So it's been very interesting to see, besides the beard growth, a lot of things have changed over the duration of time. Right. But, since
we like a beard and bourbon podcast episode here.
all things are on the creative opportunity there. So we'll put that in for vote. But that's awesome to hear. Since 2021, I'm going to guess you're going to see more change in this industry than we've seen in probably the 5-7 years prior.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that last year, during COVID, we saw a big change in how manufacturing, primarily serving manufacturing companies. I know you guys have a good foothold in the life science space, which you could speak to, but some of the automotive, industrial, some of the long-term healthcare, food and beverage, even in some cases, are archaic. They move slow. So what we found, which has been exciting, you're a young guy as well. It's nice to have some moving and shaking happen, So honestly, I think it's a time to thrive ever since COVID hit for these manufacturing companies. It was a great opportunity for them to level up their game. Obviously, I don't want to gloss over the challenges that people had during that time, but I'm of the philosophy that there's great opportunity there. And I think there's, great opportunities that companies are taking, especially in the manufacturing space.
Absolutely. And I think you said it right with opportunity. I think COVID gave people the opportunity to realize maybe it was time to retire as well. It was a time to opportunity to say, supply chain slowed things down. Let's address those IT needs, as executive solutions that are out there. So you had competing capabilities in those different silos and organization, which we see, I think it flipped it back to everybody's looking for the best of breed enterprise type of solution. Everybody's looking to get staff trained up because those people were starting to put that exit strategy together because they were like, well, I spent some time at home during COVID, and my better half said it's probably time for me to spend more time with the family. And all of a sudden, you saw a massive change when COVID started lifting. We started seeing people not only change roles but also retire, and staff augmentation, and we need solutions to help us run more efficiently. And I mean, that's a lot where I'm sure you're seeing a lot of traction since that time period.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I mean it's changing the culture of businesses as well. I mean, remote work in general, I mean, it's not a new thing, but in the manufacturing space, it's a huge challenge, and especially because of the culture that manufacturing has. You can't have people on assembly line all remote. That doesn't make sense. So, in case you didn't know that, but that sets a certain level of culture though, and we saw a lot of that shift. But what that enables is, I think, people to leverage software the way that it's supposed to be leveraged and understand how to fit their business process to the software and vice versa, with the purpose of establishing best practice, leveraging. I mean, these software companies like you guys, your job is to help people to use QAD right. Their job is not that. So inherently, you guys will have more knowledge about how to leverage that tool for their business. That's just the nature of the game. So I think it gave people an opportunity to take advantage of that knowledge and infuse that. Change management was a necessity. It happened regardless of people, preferences. So that's also a great opportunity. You need to develop a change management strategy. Well, a pandemic and changes in how everyone's working, that's one way to have a strategy. So.
Yeah, force strategy seems to be a theme when you're talking, change management and process improvement have been, I think, probably the key buzz terms and needs. And that's when we start talking about in the ecosystem where the gaps are, when companies look at a macro and a tactical level on how they're going to approach training and verifying those processes. Like, I don't know how many times I've gone back into accounts that I haven't seen, physically working. I've seen them working, but like to go back in at the process level and go, so how are you still transacting this way on the floor? And that person's changed 3 times since we've last been in there. And all of a sudden you start realizing those best practices are starting to slide. And, those companies are addressing it, but it's one of those things where, before, if it runs, right? It's, that's the floor, that's the finance group. And now they're trying to say, okay, we've got less people. We need to do more output. How do we get there? How do we get a training plan in place? And what are the tools that are at our disposal?
Yeah. I think, there's a whole lot to uncover with that. One thing I know that we had talked about that we definitely wanted to do a bit of too was to intro you a bit. I know you glossed over your intro a little bit. And part of the honor of being a part of this inaugural episode is, we gotta uncover who Andrew is, right? So let's do some of that. So you said you had background 10 years in the QAD space.
Yes.
What's that look like? Yeah.
So I've got an interesting background. So I came out of college and started for a short period of time in automotive. So I was in automotive operations. From that point, I moved off into manufacturing operations for building material products company, Lafarge, which was one of the largest cement mortar shipping and manufacturing companies globally. So I did my first 10 years there, roughly, working with enterprise solutions for tracking supply chain, materials, finance, basically terminal coordinator, and while doing implementations of enterprise software, and transitioned into the sales realm of supporting clients with enterprise products, a little bit in the HR space, and then eventually made my way over to the QAD world and have been there ever since. So for me, it's if you've watched that TV show, The Love of How Things Are Made, and you get to see how everything from toffees being made to rotors, that was basically my start of my career, where it was always very interesting to see how these things that get high production across the board, like to think how a pencil's made, to think how a heart stint's made, right? So, and you know, that 10-year gap has allowed me to work with companies all over North America, headquartered as well as global locations on better utilization of QAD and enterprise solutions. So
Yeah. Wow.
that's how I
cool. I
dropped
didn't
into
realize you
this
had an
area.
operations background. I would not have really guessed that, because I feel like you speak so well and eloquently and able to really help people understand where they need to be moving their business. Seen
Well,
it firsthand, and people have a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
trust in that. So
I
that's cool.
appreciate that. I geek out a little bit regarding like KPIs and
Awesome.
performance metrics and OEE and because of what I did it. But I mean, I still miss the fact that you know, I used to have a front ender and a forklift certification and drove big machinery right out of college. So it's
Nice.
one of those things where
That's
it's like
awesome.
when you see every part of the job, it makes how we align software. You know, whether it be for a C-level executive or for the plant manager or even the materials manager, who is some of the most fun information to go through. You know, I feel the pain, so it's easier
Yeah.
to talk to in that regard.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge benefit. Being able to speak the language, and understand, what's going on with the customer, very specifically is a huge, huge variable.
So you
It's a
know,
hard thing to learn too.
it is, and I'm not going to lie. When I transitioned from the operations side into supporting customers and understanding the product, the acronyms and getting the terminology right, it took a while, right? I
Yeah.
understood the report we're trying to run, but to figure out where it was residing in the software, to make sure that we could properly coach and train, it was an undertaking, like being back
Yeah.
at, you know, college again, sitting through lectures on what does this 3-letter acronym mean.
Yeah, it
But
was funny you mentioned that, because I remember when I first came into the QAD space, you guys do a lot at the user groups, the QAD user groups. They've got, the Southeast, Midwest, and West Coast. I've seen them leveling up their game as well, since COVID as well, which has been exciting to see, exciting to support. But what I was getting at though was my first one, which is where I first met you, back probably 7 years ago for me, 8 years ago.
is it safe to
I
share?
sat in on a bunch of SIG sessions, and it felt like going to school, because it was like I'm like jotting down EAM, ERS, everything. Like, what the frick is Dynasys? Like, what is QLM? There's so many different things.
There is, and I give the architects the utmost respect, because the amount of knowledge they have to have on a particular product. Like 20 years ago, you could have one or two people know the majority of the product. Now everything is so specialized and so deep that you're talking one or two people for per area or per acronym, as you like to say it, right? So and that training is really, to speaking of that training piece is actually, I think, a good point for us to touch on. So when I first started, we used the QAD online training portal, and there's a number of training pieces out there that help people level up, as you like to say. But the part that really excited me was this year at the Midwest User Group. They allowed different architects to do demos and one-on-one sessions in little breakout cubes for all the user group community to go up and talk and see the product and interact and ask questions. And that's the type of hands-on training that it used to be an explorer, if you will, type of opportunity, but now it's at the user group community, and you're talking the boots on the ground people are who go to the user groups. Explorer generally the C-level and the executives that are touching only the reports, and you could just see the buzz and this year and how people are receptive to that. And I think that's where you learn the fastest, is by either doing or being walked through the actual product. Because there's a lot of options out there nowadays with you've got the document library, the support center, the new part in the new UX, the guide me feature, which is really slick.
Yes, guide me. That's what it was. We were trying to
the
come up
guide
with
me's
that
coming
name.
out.
Yes,
and it's
homework.
one of those things. Yeah, it's interesting to me, because you still have to have a procedure, or at least some type of training format to be able to hand that down to your users. Like, how are you using all the tools that are out there? Because it's almost like a death from too much information. If you don't know where to look, it can be more of a detriment than a benefit, because you sit there and you get frustrated with not just having it at your fingertips, especially considering we're such a instant gratification society, right? I mean, open your phone up. How many different things can I do on my phone, from apps to, and that's where we're heading. So, I
Yeah.
mean, what's your take on that training output of what you've seen in supporting your
Yeah.
customer base?
Yeah, the in-person sitting down at a computer screen at the user group, getting your hands dirty in the application, talking through, different use cases of different products. That was pretty awesome to see. I was pretty excited to see that happen at the user group, because I think that there there's something to be said about the different types of education that people receive, and having a variety around that. Another reason why I was excited to hear that you guys are doing this podcast is there's there's like this, you're sitting at the table with Andrew and I, hearing, us talk shop, talk about what we're seeing. I know Andrew's got some awesome people to come onto this show to sort of talk shop about, glean a lot of insights, strategic insights, if you will, um,
Thank
out of
you.
them around how to leverage these tools. So that's one realm. A little bit more formal realm would be like a panel discussion at the user group, or even like a sage on the stage type discussion, where you've got an expert up there presenting. But what happens is sometimes there's that gap between that strategic conversation, or more sage on the stage type option, and then the tactical side, and really getting your hands dirty on it. And that's super important, one, in manufacturing in general, but also with leveraging your ERP properly. As a manufacturing company, like, you need to get your hands in there and see how it operates, and then also have an expert sitting next to you to bounce ideas off of, or sitting on a call with you, to bounce ideas off of and help you navigate how to leverage that tool in your business. I think that is a incredibly important area of that. And I know, as a software company, QAD is moving away from having those people available, or those minds available, for customers to leverage in that way. They're trying to bake that into the software, which is great. That's what they should be doing. They're a software company, but there's also that gap. And what I think a customer could really benefit from is to have somebody that has the purview and the visibility across the different industries that software solution serves. For QAD, those different verticals that they serve, they've got visibility across those verticals. There's transcendent best practices, if you will, across those verticals that you could leverage that you might not know about. So tapping into the leaders in the space, with that knowledge, is an incredibly important area to get that tactical insight, and get the strategic insights tactical as well. Really make sure that those are utilized well.
Yeah, and I'm really glad we chose the name of the podcast, because it sounds like it's rolling off your tongue pretty well there, Stephen.
Yeah.
Joking aside,
It's on my brain, man.
it does stick there, and I've got to stop myself
Yeah.
from doing it. The interesting part for me was this year, and you've noticed, and we'll be bringing customers on to discuss this as well, on how they're doing the tactical piece, because I think that'll, as we transition from this high level conversation, at the macro level, and get into how they're making that happen. It'll be nice, because we're going to bring in a couple customers to talk about how are they keeping their finger on the pulse of what needs to be done on a training and an advancement in education. Mm-hmm. For those users, because obviously the more engaged you have, the better you can not only do your job, but the more that you feel valued as an employee. So there's a full circle, not just holistic view of why that's important. I know that I was sitting at the user group this year, having lunch, and the best thing I've ever heard in my life, I had one person talking about how they're excited to hear about one new feature of the software, and the group across the table from me is, well, we implemented it 6 months ago. It's running great. Here's my card. If you want to have a conversation or hear how we're doing constant process improvement, utilizing that tool, let us know. And I'm like, that's exactly what this user group is made for, right? It's for people to be able to connect on ideas, to understand how people are tactically deploying and utilizing products. Now, yeah, we're there to help, and we've got plenty of team members to support that, just like you do for your product. And we offer many options to do that, which many of our clients still take us up on. We might even be just a
Yeah.
litmus test they reach out to every couple of years to make sure that they're still doing best practices. They're not missing anything. A lot of times, when someone's been using something for a good period of time, no different than me in my car today, realizing I have a sunroof when it's actually warm enough to use it, you forget
Yeah.
that you have those tools in your toolbox. Right.
Yeah. For that hour, 40-minute drive through traffic, you need some sun, my man.
Yeah, dodging the Michigan State flower, which is the road cone. So it was it was a fun experience. But
Awesome.
yes, so I'm excited as we take it and look at how companies are applying that there. But we talk about there's the training piece, but there's also that part where we get involved, like you get involved with your customers, and there's an element of, hey, there's a gap here that could be filled, and it could be filled by not just process but possibly even software. And I know that we've partnered over the years, and you've been really good and diligent about helping clients with automation and taking risk off their plate. And I know you were speaking about one of your customers. You had a really good success story, and I wanted to make sure we shared that today, because a lot of times when people are out there, they're thinking that, oh, this is just there's no ROI in software anymore. Everything's a subscription without having a back end to it. And it's actually not the case. It's becoming more and more ROI efficient.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it speaks to the need for people to appropriately implement the software and then utilize solutions that make sense for their business, and I appreciate when somebody goes through a more rigorous, especially like we're working with large enterprises, they go through a rigorous selection process, which I appreciate, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to help them understand how to best leverage that tool. One thing, one gap I did want to talk about too, that I think this is helpful is, we talked a lot about the user group and the education that comes with that user group, but I think there is a gap in this space of these types of formats that's accessible at your fingertips more regularly, doesn't require travel, for states away, or hours away in some cases, but is readily available at your fingertips on whatever cadence that you're looking for, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it might be. So I'm excited for that. I think you got, I'm excited to help bridge that gap. But then related to that, within QAD, there's gaps, with the software that are understood by QAD. And I think that's going to happen with any software. It's actually not a negative to QAD at all. And it's probably a positive, because they do a lot of things really well and they're focused on that. And then they have strategies in place to bridge those gaps, whether that's a robust partner network, whether that's a buy strategy or whether that's a build strategy. They recently had that transition to private equity, and you guys are experiencing that infusion of cash that helps with the build and buy strategy. And then there's situations where it makes sense to partner, and that could be an interim situation or it could be a long-term. It's really up to the gap that needs to be filled, and what people's strategies are to fill those gaps. But what you're speaking to specifically there with DocLib and the gap that we seek to fill is around automation in the financials departments. Specifically, we've been focused on accounts payable. We've been doing that since 2004 was the first time we automated AP in QAD, and now it's like kind of a thing, which was kind of crazy, because back when we first started doing this, it was not a thing at all. Now you type in AP automation into Google and it's a thing. Like people are doing it, and it's almost a necessity. It's a strategic priority that people take on. Well, why do they take that on? And what we were highlighting, in a webinar recently with SIG and with customers, is using an automation tool to better your business and utilizing a software product that's going to help you to do that. So specifically, that could look like, an AP, you've got these supplier discount credit terms. A supplier gives you net 90 terms in your contract, or you have a net 90 terms with them, but if you're going to pay them early, that's obviously in their interest, and a lot of times they will pass along that savings. For the cash now is better than cash later for a lot of reasons, but they'll pass along those savings. So how do you take advantage of that in AP and quantify something like that. So for my tech, for example, they wanted to leverage their college educated people to not be punching numbers into, QAD supplier invoice, view screen, whatever it is, maintenance. They wanted to have those people strategically looking at reports around where they could take advantage of some of these discounted credit terms, where they could take advantage of eliminating the need for fire payments, where they've got everybody up from this to the CFO needing to drop everything to get a key supplier paid within that hour. How do we get visibility so that we don't end up in those situations? And there's indirect costs with that, but there's also direct savings. So, for them in particular, with that one report that they built themselves, I wish I could say that we came in and we're like, hey, you should do this. No, they automated, they built that report, and we're able to quantify $600,000 of savings off a $60K investment. And I think that is a massive testament to utilizing the right solutions that are well integrated, with your core system of record being your ERP, which it should be, having a well integrated tool set that you can leverage and build reporting off of, and then change your business process accordingly, and leverage that internally. It's huge. So much so that we picked off the person that, built that report, but
well, you've got an advocate for it then, if you pick them off, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a real positive. I mean, when you talk about that type of, not just ROI, but positive impact on an organization, right? How much free time that did, how much, eliminating of human error, especially when you're talking about keying in items, the risk that it takes off the plate. And I think
it sounds stupid, but even like duplicate payments, like in QAD, it's a warning. You get a warning when you go to input an invoice a second time, and you can override that warning. And oftentimes when people do a study, if you're processing 5,000, 10,000 invoices per month, it might be like, how could you do that? Well, no, they're overwhelmed with their work. They don't have time to go investigate that duplicate payment. And you end up paying those suppliers twice. It happens. Like, go run the report, take a look at it. You will find duplicate payments. It's pretty concerning, and it's startling, honestly. So how do you leverage the people's time properly? How do you leverage a college educated person to go and look and talk with that supplier, figure out a better process with that supplier, instead of just trying to get through this stack of 10,000 invoices every month? That's a stupid thing to do, honestly. I mean, I'm not to be offensive to those people doing it, because it makes sense. You got to do it. But if there's a better way that's going to obviously help you guys out tremendously, I think that's definitely something to at least consider. And to my point earlier, look at all the tool sets out there and make a decision, based off of your criteria, make sure it's a robust criteria, and leverage it properly,
Yeah. And you can't echo enough of what you're saying there, because the part that you talk about, is there a mousetrap for this problem, right? Or is there a better widget?
Yeah.
It's not just that. You tie in the fact that what is the process that's being done. So you're questioning the process that you're already utilizing before you put in the solution. And then you're talking about integration and system of record, which I think is a lot of times overlooked, because people go and look at point solutions or enterprise software pieces without looking at the integration capability. And then what you end up doing is you see a very slick tool, if you will, but if it's not going to talk and interact well with your core solution and your system of record, you're not layering on benefit to the company. At the end of the day, a lot of times you're going to layer on a lot of, you're shifting it. And if you're shifting where your core data is, there's a lot of implications that are upstream and downstream that you're adding more work in some cases. So, it's interesting.
I mean, and that's a big thing, on AP. And I've had this conversation where I've let people know that I don't think they're ready for automating AP, because their upstream purchasing process is not tight. They've got a lot of issues with their buying process, and their POs the data is jacked up, or it's not saved properly in their system of record. And that you can't automate AP. It's just going to exacerbate your purchasing problem. You could gain efficiency, but you're not going to achieve ROI. You need to look at it holistically and not just shift the problems up or downstream. You need to look at it, how are we actually empowering the business to solve this problem and not shifting it. It's huge. It's a big thing.
So you said something there that I want to tie on that I think is big when we talk about the partner community and the roles our organizations both serve, being PICS and Strategic Information Group, is when we're a thought leader and we're going in to offer solution or guidance in partnership towards whatever the outcome may be. A lot of times clients don't like to hear the word no. And they're like, well, it works for us. Yes, but like you said, your upstream process is broke, and no, we should not go forward with this. And and people don't realize the credibility that gives you with your partner, but it's also the fact that you don't want to waste cycles of their time and what you're going to do to that staff that's going to think that they're going to get the benefit, and then there's going to be other problems that are associated by not addressing the full process flow or workflow. So it's critical when you start looking for partners and products and solutions that the person that's talking to you isn't just looking to sell the product, but it's also looking to develop that long-term relationship. All of our products are a marriage, right? They're 10 plus years in some cases for engagement of usage and cost and benefit. So it's
that's 100%. I mean, and not, I mean, a shameless plug here, there's a situation where, I'll say you guys need to work on your process. You need to have a needs assessment done of your accounting process holistically. Call up Andrew, sign a contract for a needs assessment, get somebody in there, get a nice, robust, comprehensive plan in place of all of the gaps, all of the opportunities to fill those gaps, and the recommendations from experts on how to fill those gaps. And eventually, play a longer game, because then at the end of the day, year from now, 2 years from now, you have a customer that's going to be a flagship customer, as opposed to somebody that's like feels a little like the wool was pulled over their eyes when you tried to hammer their screw instead of giving them, hey, talk to this guy about a screwdriver. We'll talk about the house later,
Oh, absolutely. And I laugh because I know that a lot of times you're familiar with the number of our financial consultants, and they'll be at a point where, hey, we need to get Stephen involved. There's some opportunity here. And when I work with that person, say, okay, let's get PICS involved. And you're talking about, listen, there's benefit here for you, but also you're going to look really good as a manager in this department because you're going to have more time for your staff that you're hiring with the skill set from, like you noted, college to do certain work for your organization. That there's a lot more here to unpack than just automation. There's so much upstream.
Well, and it's funny, on my podcast we have one that we just talk about like business, and we went deep on the past couple about education, and you just highlighted that, but I kind of unintentionally highlighted college education. But our conclusion on that is oftentimes, especially in this industry, getting your hands dirty, getting hands on is really the best type of education. And a lot of that just happens when you are leaned in, ready to learn, and you've got your butts in the right seat to learn it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be college educated. No. So I walked that statement back a little bit, but
it's a good walk back because we talk about other products, the things that we offer, like yourselves, we're talking shop floor, it could be the training and utilization for the training materials that you do on tablets for forklift operators who are, certified trainers. And so there's all different levels of education. It could be just a certificate saying I'm certified to drive a forklift. It could be a certification saying I'm a materials manager and I understand all the different requirements regarding hazardous materials and OSHA and MyOSHA and all these different requirements. So as we say, it's more of an overarching where, we just understand that anybody to do their job in manufacturing, it is not there's no job anymore that's we hire off the street and you come in with that skill set without having any capability. Everything's too automated. Processes are moving too quickly. You need to be a skilled workforce, and that's from labor on up.
Well, the cool thing is, I think that's going to speak really well to your audience, because especially somebody that's, listening to our podcast here 40 minutes in, they're leaned into their job. If they're still listening at this point, and they're ready to go. They want to, they're leaned in, they want to learn, they want to take advantage. They've got ambition. So I think, leveraging tools like this podcast, leveraging training, consultants in the space, and also ancillary tools that you can leverage and bring to the table, that's how you're going to fulfill that ambition. And that's a cool thing. Anybody can do that. I'm all about that. I think that's always cool to watch somebody fulfill that ambition. So I hope that this brings some of that opportunity to some of these people.
And that's a good closeout. I think from, we talked about education and the ecosystem, and I think the next steps are for us to engage with some customers, yours and ours, and look at doing some collaborative things where we have them talk about the tactical, as well as what they're doing out there since COVID. So at that point, I'll say, of course, I'll also talk on the private equity piece in the next couple episodes, because the cash infusion, the buy, build, or partner is changing my world and yours, and we'll dive into that in more detail as we move forward. But Stephen, I appreciate your knowledge, your background, of course, is you being the leader in this space for us in the QAD community. And thank you for your time today, and look forward to the next one.
Honor to hang out with you, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, I'm sure we'll be seeing each other soon.
Yes, we will. Yeah, and we got to have. You can cut this out if you want, but.
Woodford Double Oak's fine. I'm actually in a speakeasy podcast room, and there is a line of bourbon on a shelf right outside this door. So we will.
Nice.
I'll have to see what the powers that be at my organization allow, and we'll figure out the next.
Hey, that could be a pretty solid segment. I think you could tie that pretty well into a customer appreciation event as well. Your solid bourbon segment. So keep it in mind.
Always in for it. But thank you again, and then we'll be touching base shortly.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephen. Take care.